when Mercedes and Toto Wolff cried because they couldn't stop the porpoising on the car, because mainly they refused to, because the easiest way to stop the porpoising last season was to just raise the ride height of your car. But the problem is that makes you slower because you don't have as much downforce. So they refused to do it because their car was already a crap box. So if they made themselves even slower, they'd be fighting Haas for 14th place, which would be terrible for Mercedes.
Yeah.
So instead, they used their drivers as a scapegoat and kept ruining their backs, making them bounce up and down on crap like that, and just using them as a scapegoat to complain. And even though every other team had fixed the porpoising issues, and we did at that time still have a decently tight match between Ferrari and Red Bull, they basically complained enough to the FIA, forced everyone to raise the minimum ride height of the cars. When you do that, it means you have to you generate less downforce from the floor of the car, which was the whole purpose of the new generation of car debuted last season.
Interesting.
The whole engineering principle behind it is you have to generate 40% of your downforce from the floor of the car, which means that you can then push that dirty air up into the rear wing, and then the rear wing points it up instead of out. So there's less dirty air going to the car behind you, making it easier to follow in turns, therefore making it easier to pass and follow closely in turns, which, if you watch the first half of the races last season, it was awesome. We were getting people they would get past in a DRS zone and they could fight back. The first half of the 2022 season, we got what we wanted. They were able to follow closer. Like, my biggest exhibit A for evidence on that it was working was Jeddah in 2022. Remember when Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen were going back and forth, trading the lead of the race?
Yeah.
For 5 straight laps, like they passed each other back and forth three times.
Such
in a row.
an exciting race.
It was amazing, right? Yeah. And that was 2 different teams' cars, right?
Yeah.
And essentially, that's because they had a lower ride height. They were generating 40% or more of the downforce from the floor of the car. And the only way you can do that is by lowering the ride height of your car. If you have too high of a ride height, you can't generate as much downforce from the floor. So where does that downforce go? Oh, you have to get that downforce from the rear wings and the front wings again, which then causes more dirty air, which then makes we just go back to square one. So because of Mercedes, obviously, I do want to put 100% of the blame on Mercedes, because I hate Mercedes with respect, especially Toto Wolff with respect. And Torpedo Russell with respect,
right?
And Lewis Hamilton with respect,
right?
But
anybody else, or that's the list? Okay.
Well, and their financial backers, because they were outspending everybody, and that's how we're winning their first 7 championships.
Right.
With respect, with respect.
Yeah,
I'm kidding, not
with respect. Yeah.
With respect. But because of that whole debacle and us raising the minimum ride height of the cars, we're going backwards instead of forwards. So we're kind of back to where we were, to a lesser degree, but still the same problem of now it's harder to overtake. Like, look at what happened with Miami. Like, Miami was good, but with how big of a DRS straight we had, it was still ridiculous at how hard it was to overtake even at Miami.
Yeah.
Baku, the fastest street circuit with the longest straight of any street circuit, and really the longest straight of any F1 track. It seemed like it was almost impossible to overtake there. And it's because they could get really close in that straightaway, and they couldn't follow through sector 1 and sector 2. They refused to raise the ride height of their car since they couldn't figure it out and upgrade the car or change the setup in any way that could solve the problem. So they screwed themselves, but they kept using their drivers to scapegoat, and they ruined the raceability of the cars for the rest of the field, in my opinion. And they're part of the reason that Red Bull is dominating to the extent that they were, because before the ride height was the minimum ride height was raised, Red Bull was doing really good. They were catching Ferrari, but they weren't running away with races like they are now.
Right.
Even in 2022, they weren't running away with the races to the extent that they did in the back half of the season. They weren't winning every single race. They were still battling with Ferrari. Ferrari was still being Ferrari and messing up perfect winnable races, but it was at least Ferrari messing it up and not just Red Bull being that much better in regards to the car. And like I said, you can look at the statistics. Once that minimum ride height was raised, Red Bull didn't lose a race until Brazil, the second last race of the season or third last race of the season, and they won everything else. And now they've won everything since. In 2023, they haven't lost a race. So it literally, that regulation doubled the margin by which Red Bull was winning by, because of the fact they could generate so much more downforce from their wings without creating more drag. And, not to mention, they have right now the best power unit in the game.